All right, peace, family. I wanted to go in on the Native American slave trade real quick. I hear a lot of people talking about the transatlantic slave trade, but they either seem to ignore the Native American slave trade or they just don't know it. But the English copied the Spanish and Portuguese. They saw the enslavement of the Africans and Native Americans as moral, legal, and socially acceptable institution. A rationale for enslavement was just war, taking captives and using slavery as an alternative to death sentences. The escape of the Native American slaves was frequent because they had a better understanding of the land, which African slaves did not. Consequently, the natives who were captured and sold into slavery were often sent to the West Indies or far from their home. So you had a Native American slave trade where they was taking Native Americans and sending them to the West Indies. And you always hear these people say that when the Native Americans came over here, when the Africans came over here, they were sent to the Caribbeans and then sent out to other parts of the land. But they don't tell you about mainland America sending slaves to the West Indies. So these people were just being shuffled around. In other colonies, slavery developed into a predominant form of labor over time. It is estimated that Carolina traders operating out of Charleston exported an estimated 30,000 to 51,000 Native Americans between 1670 and 1715 in a profitable slave trade with the Caribbeans, Spanish Hispaniola, in northern colonies. So they just South Carolina, or just the Carolina, was giving out 30,000 to 51,000 Native American slaves through their port. And this is something that a lot of us don't hear about. It was more profitable to have Native American slaves because African slaves had to be shipped and purchased, while Native slaves could be captured and immediately taken to plantations. Let's read that again. It was more profitable to have Native American slaves because African slaves had to be shipped and purchased, while Native slaves could be captured and immediately taken to plantations. Whites in northern colonies sometimes preferred Native American slaves, especially Native American women and children, to African and Native American women, to African. Because Native American women were agriculturalists and children could be trained. However, Carolinians had more of a preference for African slaves, but also capitalized on the Indian slave trade, combining both. In the eastern colonies, it became common practice to enslave Native American women and African men, with the parallel growth of enslavement for both African and Native Americans. This practice also led to a large number of unions between Africans and Native Americans. The practice of combining African slave men and Native American women were especially common in the South Carolina. Native American women were cheaper to buy than Native American men or Africans. Moreover, it was more efficient to have Native American women because they were skilled laborers, the primary agriculturalists in their communities. One example is a documented WPA interview from a former slave, Dennis Grant, whose mother was a full-blooded Native American. She was kidnapped as a child near Beaumont, Texas in 1850 and made a slave, later becoming a forced wife of a slave. The abduction showed that even in the 1800s, little distinction was made between African Americans and Native Americans. So if little distinction can be made between these two groups must look the same. So what we had at this time was the Native American woman was mixing with the African man. If you believe in the slave trade full narrative, it says 300,000 black people came to the United States of America, and 66% were males. So what in the world, how was these males reproducing if they were 66%? A woman is limited to one pregnancy a year. So if we're going to be realistic about it, they would have had to outsource who the African male was reproducing with. So we showed the native slave trade. We showed the unity between the African and Native Americans on a plantation because they was being enslaved side by side. So why these people don't talk about that? But it's a Free Black Society presentation. I just wanted to comment on the Indian slave trade. Peace.